I've been in dogs since 1991. We breed dogs that we want to train. I was out here in western Nebraska riding Harleys and training dogs. I don't sugarcoat anything, and if you don't like it, tough.
Well, thank you for joining us today again on another episode of the Flatlander Kennels podcast with Chris Jobman. So like I said on the last episode last Wednesday, we decided to break this conversation with Dave into a couple of parts. So this is part 2 of the Flatlander Kennels from the judge's chair with Dave Marsteller. He has done a bunch of HRC judging, I think 73 events. Also has started judging AKC and some field trial stuff. So we are going to jump right into that right now. Here is part 2 of the judge's chair with Dave Marsteller.
You had no idea I was going to ask this question. In all your 943 judging assignments, what's the best dog you've ever seen you run a hunt test that you judged?
Oh boy,
this would be interesting. You can think about it for a little while.
Yeah, I'll come back to that.
You've seen a lot of dogs, and I've seen a lot of the same dogs you've seen a lot, and you've seen some ones that I haven't seen down south and stuff. And I mean, you've judged it from coast to coast basically, so you've seen a lot of really, really good ones.
A lot of good dogs. Washington. So judging assignments. One thing about judging, Elliot, is I've met some crazy good people. And I've seen some country that most people don't get to. I was invited up to British Columbia, Vancouver Island, and that was a shocker. Because down here, I'm used to running. Well, we're used to judging 30 dogs, and I'm judging 26 labs, 2 Goldens, a Chesapeake, and a poodle. Up in Vancouver Island, I judged 15 Goldens and 2 labs. So just the dynamic of judging. And then I've judged a lot in Washington State. One time over in Idaho, enjoyed it. Arizona, Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma. So I've made the Western rounds pretty good. And I've enjoyed every place that I've judged. The clubs really work hard to make the judge's life as easy as possible. So shout out to all the clubs that help the judging. And like I said, you just meet a lot of different people. And we can discuss this further, but I will just say that you learn each region has its own nuances and standards. And it is crazy how high the standard is 100 miles away from Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Can you expand on that a little bit about different parts of the country and the differences that you see? Is it tangible enough that you could talk about what some of those differences are from
before
place
Dave
to place?
answers this question, Elliot, I'm going to throw my 2 cents in when I see from region to region, and he can, and then he'll go in, because he is 100% correct. The difference of regions, and I haven't been out way west for HRC, but I ran everything from here east, basically. And what I've seen in this region is, and it's changing a little bit now, but this region, and I'm not saying anything bad about it, but usually this region, HRC people are HRC people, AKC people are AKC people. There's very few people that run HRC run AKC.
And you're talking about the Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming area? Is that when you say this
South
region?
Dakota,
Kansas?
This
Okay.
region 13A, whatever we are.
Okay.
This region is so unique that HRC people are HRC people and AKC people are AKC people. Now, there are some vice versas, but you don't see HRC judges in this region judging AKC and vice versa. Dave is doing it now. This is the weirdest thing. You go east, everybody runs everything. There's very few HRC only type people. So it's very different in regional. It's just a very different thing. I've never seen anything like it. So it's whatever, Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we're not digging on a certain region or anything like that. But if you think about it, if you continually pass your best friends, and it's really hard to judge friends. I hate judging friends. In fact, it's no secret I've lost some friends over me sitting in the chair. But when you pass what some would consider mediocre work, you're actually setting that handler up for failure, because they get a 300, 400 point dog and they drive to Montana. And there's something about the land up in Montana. It'll go from pine forest to a bog to sandstone hills, all in one test setup. So you're talking in a span of 150 yards left to right, you've got 3 different trains. And so when we pass your buddy's dogs or your friend's dogs without the highest standard, or did you do a buddy pass, or did the dog earn it that week? Who knows? But when those people travel, I mean, they just spent how much money? 200 miles, fuel, hotels. They get their dog out. It's winning everything in the region that they're from, and then they walk into a buzzsaw.
It's like golf.
Right.
It's like golf. And I used to play a lot of golf when I was younger. Does your game carry? And what I mean by that, does your game travel? And what I mean by that is, if you play the same 1 or 2 golf courses every single day, all day long, you go to a different golf course that's a little bit harder, a little bit different setup. Your game may not travel because you're so used to the game you're playing. It's the same thing in this region. If you don't try different venues and you don't try different regions, does your game travel as a handler and a trainer? And
that's a handler issue, not a dog issue. Dogs are dogs. It's the handler.
Correct. That's 100% right. So does your game travel? So you see a lot of people that stick in one region and run local yokel finish tests, and go to the Grand and get ate up, or they go to a different region and they get ate up, and they don't understand why. Because your game doesn't travel, you're stuck in.
Because they personally didn't know how to handle whatever the train was. They just mismanaged it.
The dog just can't handle the setup because maybe it's longer, maybe it's tighter, maybe there's more of an AKC influence like you ran, right? That could have very easily been a finish test that you ran. So the regions that have judges that run HRC and AKC and judge AKC and HRC, we're starting to see more in those regions down south, out east. Their AKC influence is starting to come into HRC, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just how the game is evolving. And if you don't step out of your little bubble, right, your game doesn't travel because you've not seen it, right? You're not used to that technical tight setup. So that's kind of what we're talking about, right, when that happens.
I've never heard that explained that way, but that's absolutely the way it is. Here, you'll see a dog or two that come out of the holding blind. They'll beat the handler to the bucket. They'll knock the bucket over. The gun will go on the ground, that type of thing. I will tell you, up in Washington State, with the judges up there, that dog would be roped and done for the day.
And the real reason for that is the Northwest, a lot of those judges from up the Northwest and or chairman or wherever, they've judged the Grand. They've been to the Grand. They've ran the Grand. They've helped with the Grand. And whether it's right or wrong, the Grand, as great a game as that is influencing those finish tests up there. And that's why you see that. You put your dog in the bird. That's a Grand influence because they've stepped outside their bubble and tried to get better as handlers and trainers and looked at something bigger and better. This region, not saying anything bad, but very few. Mike Swan runs a Grand, but very few people in this region who judge and stuff try the Grand or try AKC. So their outside influences are very minimal compared to other areas of the country. So it's just human nature. If you try to go run the Grand and you're a judge or you've judged the Grand from that region, you're going to bring those influences into your region. That's just human nature. That's what happens. And that's why he's saying that. You do that crap in the Grand, you're done. And they've carried that over into that region.
So as a judge, and just like you as a teacher, Elliot, every day you are influencing the next generation. It's the way the ball bounces. That's what teachers do. Well, judges, we have mentors as well. But when I was a Region 13 judge, I get invited up to Washington, and I get paired with very experienced judges. That affects my standard. When I come back home, I'm like, hey, what do you guys think about that? And they're like, well, so I've kind of got a little bit of trouble about trying to bring in the Washington State region or standard or the Montana standard. Then you go into the eastern Nebraska side, and that standard is a little higher. And it just depends on where you go and what people see and do. And it's some people take the marking and blinds, and some people take the whole concept dog into their judging. So it's just a unique situation of where you go and what you've learned and who has mentored you and influenced you as a judge.
So let me ask you a question about line manners. You mentioned a dog coming up, bucket getting knocked over, or something like that. So if you've got, there's two judges, you and one other. If a dog comes up and has horrible line manners, is knocking over a bucket, are the two of you just whispering to each other? What do you think? Who's ultimate? It's a group decision between you and the other judge, right? So you're whispering, what should we do? Should we flunk it? Should we fail it? How does that, or is there a HUD judge? And how does the dynamic between the two people work?
Thank you for bringing that up, Elliot. Absolutely. There's two judges, and they're equal, unless there's an apprentice. Then there's the apprentice approved or AA judge and the apprentice. But day to day in the chair, there's two judges. They both have 50% of the voice. You have to agree to pass a dog, and you have to agree to fail a dog. It is not one judge that can make that decision. So,
some of those decisions, like line manners, that's a spur of the moment decision, right?
Absolutely.
That decision has to be made right then. So you're just in each other's ear?
We just look at each other and point and look, and if the handler gets everything put back together, 9 times out of 10 we throw them the marks. But all those are notes are taken out on the judges' sheets. And if we see the same thing in water, it'll be a pretty good influence on whether or not we pass or fail that dog.
So it is cumulative.
Finished level control.
So it is cumulative on the first, like on the morning versus the afternoon. If the dog has really bad line manners in the morning, then you're going to be less tolerant in the afternoon. So there is some crossover there, right?
There is. And the landmarks are separate from the watermarks, but collective, it comes down to marking and memory. And the water blind and the land blind collectively come down to teamwork and control.
Mm-hmm. One more question about line manners. I've got a friend, my main training buddy, who's got a wonderful little yellow dog named Delta, and he wants, his aspirations are the Grand, and his dog is a little bit whiny up until about the first mark. And some people, he's moved over to AKC, and he's passed 3 in a row, but on the last one, his dog was especially vocal. And some people with him said he saw the judges kind of talking to each other with the dog's vocal nature. What exactly I know that every judge is probably a little different, but as far as a finish test, clear up to a grand test, what is going to get a dog disqualified as far as vocalization at the finish level and then at the grand level also?
I can't speak on anything grand related. I have yet to play in the Super Bowl of HRC, and I have not attended a grand. So This is just a weekend local HRC finish judge answer here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Out of 73 finish tests, I've failed 2 dogs for barking. One was in Washington State, and that dog it just didn't stop. So it's a game. HRC is a game that keeps us active until we can hunt again. But at the same time, if that dog is barking, our duck's going to finish. As a judge, that's a question that I ask myself.
Isn't there a deal too that says when you look at the overall performance of a dog, isn't there something in there that says, I'm not smart enough to be a judge, I just run the test. So isn't there something in there that says, would you go hunting with this dog?
That is a question that we ask ourselves.
Would you hunt with this dog? And a dog that's doing that, I want nothing to do with it. And a lot of times, now I've had dogs whine and be vocal and whine in tests. And when you hear a dog that's too loud, you know it. There's really no set, hey, it's a 5 on that. And when you hear it, you know it. Because we're all like, whoa. You know what I mean? You turn your head. Now, you hear some whining and stuff. Georgie does it or whatever. But when you hear it, you know it. So
flat out barking. I mean, that's barking. I've failed 2 dogs out of 73 judging assignments for barking. When the birds are down and the dog gets released and it lets out a yip or it lets out a bark, then I put it to the dog's desire to do his job. I mean, you fill a balloon with so much helium, it's going to pop, right? Well, these dogs are so wired and so driven that they've got to have some sort of small release. And as long as it's after the ducks are down, I'm okay with it. Some dogs on a blind retrieve, you line them up, you kick them off, you'll get a little yip. I'm okay with it.
Doesn't there something there too that says you can't disturb the hunt? So once you blow a duck call and you shoot that first popper, you can't disturb the hunt any more than a shotgun. So I'm being devil's advocate. You shoot the first gun, boom, and then it started making noise. You've already disturbed the hunt with a shot.
Correct. But the dogs that we dropped were barking before the guns went off.
There you go. I need to specify that. There's a thing that says disturb the hunt. After you shoot that first popper, there's no way to disturb the hunt more than that.
Right.
So the dog is making noise before
most of the vocalization would come before that.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Holding blind to the line.
Dogs that are really in trouble, they're being vocal before the duck call and before the shot of the first gun.
Right.
So, I think, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Elliot, so I will say at the Grand, I've been there a number of times, and they will put up with a little bit, but the barking and stuff, that's not going to happen. That's
excited whining as they're waiting is not
degree, yes.
As long as it's but moves to barking, it's done, or excessive. What you call excessive whining.
Excessive, and we use Now that whining turns into moaning and all kinds of crazy crap. But when you hear it, you know it, and a little bit is it's okay, right? It's not going to be as bad. But when it's above, when it's louder than the duck call, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I do have another question. I don't want to monopolize Chris. So if you have some things to say,
go ahead. No,
over. But you talked about setting, like there was a trap today, and I think you guys referred to it as a trap with the wind and the mark and everything. Do you in setting up a hunt test, do you ever set up little traps like that? And if so, just talk about that and just what goes into you designing the hunt in general, or the test setup in general.
He's the king of the trap.
Wow. Okay. A lot of it is ground dependent.
Yeah.
You come over to FLK, you go down to Kansas City Retriever Club to run their HRC. Mm-hmm. You're on the old Richard Walters, not the gun dog Richard Walters, but DL Walters.
DL. Big difference.
Big difference. DL Walters, training a retriever to handle, blue covered book. You get on his grounds, there's a touch of tech water. You get on Kansas City Retriever Club grounds as an HRC test. That's on Bill Eckett's Blackwater North grounds. There's some tech water there. And I was restricted from walking out and looking at it, but I talked him into letting me have the north end. So that's one thing that we look at is what grounds do we get? Some grounds are flat, featureless, and we just play with them. We throw the best that we can. But there are certain bird placements that you can throw that will tell you what kind of dogs that you have in the flight, that type of group. But in all honesty, Elliot, you've got to remember that HRC is about the weekender. Mm-hmm. So I'm not throwing a test for Chris Jobman or Andrew Copa or Eric Tayson to run. I've got to throw a test for the average weekender who doesn't have access to tech water.
Right.
And so that you've got to keep that in the back of your mind. Who are we doing this for? We're doing this for the weekender. But me and Chris were discussing earlier, I like to be entertained when I judge. So I like to watch dogs. I like to watch the dogs work. But I will tell you, 3 around the horn and a blind up the middle will put me to sleep after dog 10.
That's all the grand is.
That's
around the horn up the middle.
Around the horn up the middle.
Best dogs in the world. And maybe not around the horn, but it might be right, left, middle. But there's 3 marks in a blind. Very distinct areas of fall. Go get them.
So through my 73 adventures in this, I've learned a lot about you don't need to trick dogs. You don't need to throw tricks. If you have to throw a trick, then you don't know bird placement. In all honesty,
how long it's taken for him to admit that? This is the years of grinding on him for him to admit that. This is a big deal. He's growing up right before our eyes.
He just said Dear Diary and started writing stuff down. I don't know what it was, but so good bird placement, the grounds. Keep in mind who your participants are. I do not serve participation entries or anything like that. I meet with 4 judges, and we all go out to the water, and we go out to land, and normally we don't pick. When we show up on Fridays, every judge gives off a day of vacation if they're not retired to set up these tests. We meet at the grounds, and we look around, and if I see something I like, I'll say, hey, guys or gals or folks, can I have this middle mark? Or if I go to a water, I will look around and I see blinds first. Drives Chris crazy. He sees marks, I see blinds. But
everybody listening, if your judge sees the blinds before the mark, that judge will be a control judge. That is a control
Dave,
judge.
do you agree with that? You agree with that, Dave?
I don't see myself as a control judge. It's
a control judge.
It stands out to me.
So that being said, they like to see good blind work. Now their marks can be good too, but if somebody, trainer, amateur, trainer, judge, it doesn't matter. If they see blinds first, usually that person likes a really, really good blind running dog, and he likes dogs that are under control.
That I will agree with.
But if you're a judge or a person who likes to see the first thing they see is marks, they love to watch dogs run and go get marks. And typically, their standard on control is a little bit lower because they want to see dogs do what dogs do, and they want to see dogs run and go get the marks.
So I do like my blinds. No secret out there.
That's a military thing.
So there's 4 judges that agree on these tests. And then we flip on who gets land and who gets water, and Saturday morning we throw our tests. I understand that weather, time can cause the other set of judges to change the test a little bit. But what we found in some certain circumstances is if we threw the test as it was agreed upon and designed, and then it gets changed a little easier, maybe a little bit different mark, 2 judges can be the bad people on a weekend pretty quick. But normally everybody agrees on it and it stays the same and we run it the way it is. But so I'll set up. So last weekend in Great Plains, as an example, or 2 weeks ago at Great Plains, we had a pretty featureless open field, and I said, I'll take the middle mark. And then the other 3 judges kind of added to that middle mark, and then we had a blind off to the side. And then when we went to water, with the birds that we're getting nowadays, I hope that when I'm a handler, that the judges throw the water test. The birds are, the majority of them land on land. Because if not, by dog 15, everybody's getting a soaking wet bird.
And that's a big difference, too, in AKC and HRC. A lot of AKC tests, you're going to see those birds land on land. And HRC, for some reason, it's getting better now, but for some reason, HRC judges think they have to throw the birds everything in the water. And like Dave said, the bird quality isn't the greatest anymore, and they need to really think about what they're doing, because dog 1 and dog 15 and dog 20 and dog 30, it's not the same test. It's not even close. So all your memory birds are sinking, and then you're getting a handle and you fail because you got bad birds. But for some reason, HRC thinks they have to throw them in the water, and it's been really hard to get judges to change their minds. And the reason, and people that are HRC only judges and HRC only people are like that. When you go from AKC and AKC and they play both venues, those people are more likely to say, hey, these birds aren't very good. Let's throw up on land if we can. That way it's the same for every single dog. Because at a hunt test, let's face it, it's a pass or fail, and it should be relatively similar for every single dog. And there's no way to do that with sinking birds. Landing on land, you can do that very easily. So
like I said, when we do setups, we agree upon it, and we just build upon the blind, and so if we set up a blind first, we build the marks into the blind. We'll have at least one mark that influences the blind. If we set up the marks first, we'll have a mark, then reverse influence the blind, is how we get that done.
Have you ever gotten 5-6 dogs in and you're like, uh-oh, this is way harder than what I thought it was going to be, and all the dogs are just dropping out?
Absolutely. And reverse that, we've thrown a hard test, what we assumed would be kind of on the harder side, and 26 dogs and 26 ribbons later, they just smacked it.
Yeah.
I had a test in Kansas City, I think. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I had a test in Kansas City, I think, a couple years ago on the DL Walters property. And there was a finger coming out into the water, and then there was a island just to the right of it. And behind that was just this huge hill, and on the backside it dropped off sharp into a cornfield. So we set the blind to the left of the island, and the amateurs didn't. They did a fantastic job of challenging the line to the blind, which is something we don't see all the time. But they let their dog get on that island, and the dogs would not get off that island. And then pretty soon the handlers get nervous, and then pretty soon the voice comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And then pretty soon the dogs are on the backside of the island, across the water, up the hill, and down on the backside in the cornfield, lost. So out of 20 to 25 to 30 dogs, I was at 5. Me and my co-judge. It wasn't Dave Marsteller by himself. It was me and my co-judge we were down to 5. And I remember coming up to Dane Johnson, who was coming over to run the test. I went up to Dane and I was like, how many dogs you got? And he goes, 5. And I said, man, I need all 5 of them to pass. And he ran it, as a pro. He ran it like pros do. And he kept them dogs off the island. If they so much as dropped their right shoulder going in that island, there was a whistle and a tweet. And he docked them into that blind just like a boat. And so we ended up with 10 dogs passing that weekend or that day.
And Dane's a good dog trainer and dog handler. He actually worked for me for 6 years. So I know Dane. He's a good dog handler, dog trainer, and he's been around a lot. So he knows where to put them and not to put them.
I heard about that test. I was supposed to run it, but we had a graduation to go to, and I heard about it, of what the pass rate was, and so I was going to ask you about that.
Maybe that one wouldn't have been so easy there, big time.
Maybe not. Well, let's go into that. Let's go into that. What was your reaction to what I said on the previous episode when I said that HRC, my personal experience with the HRC was, and I've only been in one AKC test, but my personal experience was that HRC was just way easier than AKC. Do you think that's just my limited experience?
Absolutely. Any given day, Judges aren't there to fail dogs. We're there to evaluate their performance. Eileen, can you get Chris some water? He's joking. But no, we are. We're rooting for the dogs. It's not
right.
We don't want to fail them.
Right.
But we are going to evaluate
my
them.
sample size is so small. I ran into just real easier side of the tests. And you think they're pretty comparable, AKC and HRC overall, like the master versus the
depends on the region.
Finished. Right.
It depends on the region. It depends on what your dog does. In my opinion, AKC, there are certain faults that you will immediately get dropped for. Switching. Immediate, you're gone. You're done.
But switching in AKC and HRC are two completely different things.
Right. So switching in HRC is just a markdown on marking and memory.
Well, hold on. Let's talk about switching. So in HRC, switching, and correct me if I'm wrong, switching is dropping the diversion bird you retrieved and picking up the diversion bird. That is switching in HRC. If you go into one area of the fall in HRC, hunt, leave that area of fall, go to another area of fall, pick up that bird and bring it back, that is not a switch in HRC. In AKC, if you switch on a diversion bird, you're out. In AKC, if you go to an area of the fall, switch from that area of fall to a different area of the fall, you're automatically out. Switching in HRC and AKC is two completely different things. So you got to remember that.
Absolutely. So there's certain things you can do in AKC where you will immediately get dropped. And then there's other times where AKC, as long as you're above the right numbers, you can keep playing. In HRC, your dog can do something that two judges agree upon they don't like. He's not going to get a qualifying score, but he can continue to play the rest of the day.
And AKC and HRC are very different. In AKC, they cannot tell you the order of marks you have to pick up, but they can tell you the line to the blind. Like, you have to get all 4 feet on the point and off the point. They can't tell you the order of marks to pick up. In HRC, they can't, correct me if I'm wrong, they can't tell you the line to the blind. They can't say, I'm not all 4 feet on the point. But they could say, okay, when the last bird hits, we want you to pick up the first bird first, the second bird second, the last bird down third. They could tell you the order how to pick them up. So that's very different. HRC is almost more liberal when it comes to judging about what you can do if you want to get crazy.
And every test that I've ever thrown has been within the rule book.
Barely.
But if you read the rule book, it does give you some leeway on which birds that you can throw when, and like Chris said, how you can pick them up. The blind can be picked up after any bird retrieved. So,
or first.
If you pick up with the go bird, the judges can have you run the blind with 2 birds still on the ground. Or you pick up 2 birds. And then run
if every dog passes, it's too easy. If every dog fails, it's too hard. Kind of what would be your ideal kind of this test is, and I know that's going to be dependent on what type of handlers and dogs that are there, but just on a general setup, kind of what would be a pass rate that you would say, that was about perfect level of difficulty test with an average, just general pool of 30 random finished level dogs and trainers.
There's not 30 random people at a test anymore.
Well, I'm just trying to generalize it.
Yeah,
I know he's going to probably not want to answer this question.
Yeah, but I'm trying to save him from himself right now because you may have a pro there, and typically you have a really good pro in the region or a number of really good pros in the region.
Mm-hmm.
If they bring their 12 hammers, they can run 12.
Right.
Your pass rate is going to be a little bit higher. At AKC the same way. So that's hard to say because you're going to have some really, really good dogs there, and you're going to have some not so good dogs there. But if, as a judge, and Dave, we talked about this today, and Dave's going to reiterate more, if you're there to be like, you see who's showing up, right? And you're like, okay, Chris Aiken is going to be at this test. He's got 12 hammers. We are going to set up a test for Chris Aiken. All you're doing is hurting everybody below that.
Mm-hmm.
Use a finished test and or a master test an average amateur or average pro with the average hunting dog, average trained dog should be able to pass this test.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
I agree. So what I was told by a very seasoned judge by the name of Dave Help, is when I was coming up through the judging ranks, he said, Dave, if you have to throw a test that is below 50%, you've got issues. So I would say that 50% or above at the end of the day is what the average good percentage that we are shooting for. Of course, we want it higher. But like Chris just said, if you look in the back at HRC magazine under Dave Marsteller and Mike Swan, it'll say 12 of 30. And then there'll be our co-judges will be 23 of 30. What people, if they just look at those numbers, they weren't there to see that Andrew Copa had 8.
Andrew's one of my assistants here. He runs. He does a good job too.
Yeah, if Andrew shows up, and then TJ Greer, any of the other pros show up, and they're in one flight, and then me and Mike had the amateurs. They weren't there to see 3 dogs break. They weren't there to see a dog eat a bird.
Which on a diversion.
So they weren't there to see. They just see that we passed 4 or 10 dogs versus 23. Whereas the pros had the hammers, and the pros all are in one flight. So that's a lot of, what do you call it, misconception numbers.
You just have to look and see who was in the flight. Not all dogs are created equal, and not all handlers are created equal. And a lot of these hunt tests, one flight will be mostly the pros, and one flight will be mostly the amateurs. That's just how it works. And the flight that's got the good pros is typically going to pass more dogs because they're running the same test, right? They're just flip-flopping most of the time anyway. So it's not always apples and oranges to oranges when you look at pass rates. You need to look at who's there running the dogs. And I bet you,
I tell you that.
Go ahead.
No, finish your point. I'll say after that.
I would love to see a national pass rate for HRC finish test. I will bet you it hovers at 30%.
You think it's that low?
If I was to guess, I bet it hovers at 30%. Yeah, I really do. Because our dogs at this kennel, once they get their HRCHs, they come to me and we go run master. So when Andrew goes to a test, he's not taking 12 hammers. He's taking HR dogs and young finish dogs. So it's different. I'll bet you it's 30, maybe 35%. If I was to guess.
Wow.
That's just a guess.
What do you think of that, Dave? You agree with that or disagree?
I would be interested to see that as well.
Yeah.
And I'd also be interested to see the breakdown per region.
Pass rate, yeah.
The pass rate.
Yeah, for sure.
But going back one comment, Elliot, going back when those 4 judges are together, we don't say, well, you've got all pros and you've got all amateurs. We just set up what we see. And every dog is going to be a dog on a certain day.
Yeah. What were you going to ask, Elliot?
Because the standard should be the standard regardless of who's there.
Correct. Right? That's not how it works, but correct.
Yeah, boy, that 30%, I would think. I mean, I'm not saying
you run all the easy ones, so yeah.
Yeah, I hand pick them, hand pick the easy ones. Which is this? I call ahead of time. Is this going to be easy? Because if it's not, I'm not coming.
Hey, we're gonna make you YouTube famous. We got to pass.
You did run
maybe it's just because I went out there to Flatlander, did about 12 days. Chris fine-tuned my dog for me, and then everything was easy.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
No, but that test, the AKC test I went to, Lyle was there with 9 dogs. I think I'm not saying this is for sure. I think he passed 6 out of 9, and everyone else, there was 48 dogs in it, and I think the pass rate was something like 22%, and Lyle was 6 for 9. So
and you're going to get a higher pass rate. That's just going to happen. Like you look at
honestly, I loved it.
Yeah, you look at some of these master tests.
It was so fun.
If you got 3 big pros, they're dominating the 66 dogs in a single master, you're going to have a higher pass rate. That's just all there is to it, right? That's the human nature. That's just all there is to it. But there's a question here we're going to get to the next episode that's fun about how you pick the test depending on who's going to be there. So,
well, before we end off on this one, I don't know, Dave, do you have any judge stories of anything crazy or memorable that happened? And we do need to go back before we finish to the best dog you think you've ever seen, or maybe the best couple dogs you've ever seen, because you had some time to think about that.
And I want to hear Dave's number one, or not number one, but what he sees, the biggest mistakes he sees handlers make from the judge's chair when he's sitting there. He can't help him. You're like, what do you? Let's just do it now, Dave. What do you see? Give me some of your biggest mistakes that you see handlers make, pro or am.
Number one on the top, and as a handler myself, the grab and go. The handlers, the dog comes
Explain yourself.
The dog comes in with a retrieve, the go bird. And the handler doesn't slow down, doesn't take a breath, doesn't compose him and that dog. He grabs the dog, grabs the duck out of the dog's mouth, which turns the dog's head either left or right, which is completely out of the line to the next bird that he's trying to pick up. So he's pulling the duck out of the dog's mouth, and he says, Fido. And that dog runs out into the middle of nowhere. So you'll see some good handlers that stop, compose themselves, compose their dog, drop, ask their dog, talk to their dog, where's the next mark? Where is it? Right there, good. Fido. So,
I will tell you, that handler, I will bet almost anything that guy right there does not run AKC as well. I bet you that is an HRC specialist, because you do that in a tight master. Do you imagine trying to do that at the master test that you ran, Elliot? You do that at a master test, a tight master test, you have zero chance.
Yeah.
Zero chance.
The next thing is nerves, and I'm guilty as anybody. But it's the here he'll sit cadence. And the dog stopped listening to you a long time ago. So there's too much talking to a dog. And then it corresponds to, I judge a lot in the summertime up here. And I will see a dog that knocked over the bucket, came through the holding blinds, could not heel, could not go to the bucket as a team. And that handler is at every weekend test. And sometimes he passes, so he keeps going. And other times he fails, and he doesn't understand why he failed this Saturday because he didn't fail last week. So instead of not running that dog and tightening up that obedience and line manners, that's another issue that we see, is we see the same performance out of unruly dogs.
And every judge, Elliot, has their own standard. So last weekend, he runs under Joe Blow and whatever, and he passes, right, with bad line manners, choppy blind, whatever you have. The next weekend, he goes and he runs out there, such as, say, Dave and Mike. Their standard may be a little bit higher, and that's not going to fly, right? So they don't pass. And then they get upset, well, I passed last weekend. Every judge has their own standard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not black and white across the board. You have your own standard. So those people that are like that, they get upset. Let's just say Dave or whoever doesn't pass their dog. Well, that's not the standard. You need to know that, and you need to know who's your judge coming into the test. That's not going to fly with Mike to do like this.
Mm-hmm.
But that will be fine with whoever. You need to know that coming in. So and it's like that with every venue, not HRC. It's like that with every venue. Every judge has their own standard. Some are a little more lenient, some are a little more strict. So usually the judges that look at blinds first are more strict because they like to see control. That's just how they are. That's human nature.
Mm-hmm.
And my number 3, Elliot, would probably be not challenging the line to the blind. And HRC judges are handcuffed. We cannot say we want you to go from point A across point B, skim point C, and finish up at D. We get to say this is where you start, and the ribbon is where the end of it is.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of handlers do not challenge the line to the blind. And
timing.
I hate drawing L's on my papers, and I'm not real good at banana marks either. So I like a good blind. And handlers, some handlers,
that,
know,
you mean they're too late on the whistle and they're just not keeping them inside the line. Explain a little bit more in detail what it means to you to challenge the line. I think this was actually a question.
Answer the question.
Yeah. So you can literally see where you're going to start and where you're going to stop. It's a straight line. Mm-hmm. Keep your dog within the corridor of that line. And my corridor is 2 fingers up on a fist, like the University of Texas.
Right.
Ugh. So
but that's a big corridor.
That's a pretty good sized corridor.
A pretty good sized corridor. In training, my corridor is you hold your thumb up like this, and you cover the blind state.
That's a corridor. Good.
I'm serious. 100%. No, I'm serious. Because when you get to a test, when you do this, that corridor is huge. If your standard's that, right, that's a pretty good corridor. You go play the Grand, I guarantee you the corridor is not this.
Mm-hmm.
It's way tighter than that.
So then what they do is they don't blow their whistle. So that tells me their dog can't handle, and they know that. So they're just, and our blinds are not that long.
No.
Right.
90% of my bet are 60 yards.
Right.
If you find a 100-yard blind, you might find me behind you in the chair. But joking. So their dog can run 60 yards. But there was no control, and then they win the blind, and then they run over and pick it up, and the handler is elated. And I'm marking a marginal.
Yeah.
But it's not because they didn't whistle, but it's because they took some weird route to get to it.
Well, it's like Dave just said, they're scared to blow the whistle. And
if they straight line it,
you have to challenge a line. Like you have to. It's in I say this 1,000. This is not a spectator sport. You need to be involved. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. If you have a dog that doesn't challenge a line, and you do blow 2 or 3 whistles, and you let him loop into that thing and wind it, that dog's not going to pass, and you're going to give a higher score for somebody that maybe has 3 times more whistles, but you've challenged it. Like you really are trying to challenge the test. You're going to get more. You're going to get a better mark than the one that doesn't try to challenge it.
Correct.
And you may have blown 12 whistles compared to his 3, but you're going to probably pass because you challenged it. You literally, unless you have 5 cast refusals, but if you're zigzagging, like this, and you're challenging that blind, I'm not saying cross the line. I'm just saying you're challenging every factor. Because if there's factors between point A and point B, they're there for a reason to challenge. So if you're trying to challenge those factors, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to get a better score than if you try to get lazy and hope for one. That ain't going to work.
The win saves are hard to judge, and I normally marginal at best on a win save. Because you let the dog get 40 yards downwind, of course. I mean, God put noses on them, and they made them good. But it's the blind. It's the teamwork. Whistle cast. Progress to the blind. I'm not a crossover guy. The dog doesn't have to cross an imaginary line to carry it. As long as he's making good, solid progress to the blind, I'm good.
You know what they say at the Grand? Here's their exact words. Progress to the line to the blind is you're getting closer to the end of the blind, you're getting closer to the line to the blind, or they're coming back to you. That is progress. What I mean by that is they not one time, and I don't know who's listening, first judges, not one time does it come out of their mouth that you have to cross the line to the blind. Progress is closer to the line, closer to the end of the blind, or to you. What I mean to you means you may have to tweet, get him out of trouble just a tiny little bit and kick him off again.
Mm-hmm.
And get him not to you, but square him up, whatever you got to do, and get closer. That's teamwork. There's not one thing in there that says you got to cross the line to the blind. So this is going to be, we're going to stop right there on the blind thing because this is a question that we need to address in the next episode.
Sounds good.
So, because this could be literally an argument for, well, Dave and I think the same way. It's not going to be an argument, but that's a good question.
Let's move. Do you have anything else, or are you ready to move to the next one? Next thing. As far as handlers.
Dave, do you want to say anything to the handlers out there that you see, you don't see, you'd like to see? Now, this is only, and everybody listen, this is one opinion of a judge. That's judged a lot. Every judge is different. Every judge has their own opinion. When your dog is being judged at AKC or HRC, there's two people that make the decision, not one. So, and I know Dave has gotten vilified in the past for some of his deals. It's not him. It's not all him. It's mostly him. No, it's not mostly him. But anyway, that's just, he's a good judge, does a good job, tries really hard, gives his time to the sport, and he likes to see high standard work. Period. We all should. We should strive to have higher standards on their dogs. So, but he's a student of the game. He tries hard and learns, and he trains. So, but Dave, do you have anything that would you like to say out there?
No, just guys, we're all amateurs. We're all trying to learn this game. But when you come to the line, just kind of make it you and your dog against the judges, and just embarrass us for putting on such an easy test. And just challenge everything. Take your time. Slow down. Line your dog up. Get the communication in that you need, and bring back 3 and line the blind.
All right, let's go to. I want to hear him tell about the best dog he's ever seen, because you asked that at the beginning. He's had all this time to think about it.
That's a hard question.
Then we'll do that one. Then we'll close it down.
All right.
There can't be just one. I've been fortunate enough to a story that I didn't tell, and this has it'll leak into next episode with the standard that Chris was talking about. But I had the privilege and honor of standing behind Bobby George, and he didn't know me from Adam, and we were kicked off the training ground, not kicked off, but we were told to hurry up because Bobby George had the property in the afternoon. And hopefully most of you have heard of Mr. Bobby George, but I was leaning against a pickup truck watching him. Christian Alt was training with him at the time, and he turned around to me and he said, "You learn anything back there?" And I said, "Well, I'm enjoying watching." And he goes, "Stand behind me." So I've been able to watch Dave Rorm's training sessions 3 times. I see a lot of great dog work out of FLK, Show Me Retrievers, OnX Retrievers. So I've been privileged to see a lot of good dog work. But probably 3 dogs, I don't remember the pearls, but Jet.
My Jet.
FLK's Jet.
Jet was a 9-time Grand Retriever champion, Master Hunter, M&H. Yep, he was pretty good.
I got the Judge Hank, Kevin Mansfield's Hank.
Nice dog, too. Real
nice dog. Hall of Fame dog.
Real nice dog.
So in the local region, I've gotten to hand out, one of the privileges of being a judge, I got to hand out a 1,500 point slip before. And then you got the quiet people, the ones that don't want the glamour. Jason Thompson's Cooper. He is one of those dogs that runs angry. He just, if there's a bird out there, he's going to find it.
Yeah, Jason's dog Cooper's a beast.
So there isn't one dog, but I've been privileged enough to stand behind and watch some of the greats. But that's kind of a roundabout answer to a direct question.
It's a really hard question. I put him on the spot because I've been asked that same exact question, and it's impossible to answer. You've seen so many great dogs, you can't lump them. And there are some that stick out in your mind over the years, like Coopers and Jets and those dogs, but you can't say one is the greatest ever. It's just too hard to say. But I would be interested. I thought that would be a good question for you.
But yeah, I mean, you can't forget Ammo as well. I had the privilege of judging Ammo a few times. Asked a special request to Ammo one time. Didn't go over real well, but Ammo showed me what I wanted to see out of a test. Absolute smacked it. I knew that he would, if there's any dog that day that could run the test the way I kind of had it pictured in my mind, it was Ammo.
And Ammo is Eric Tizon's dog, 9-time Grand Retriever champion, Mass Hunter, MNH 5, I believe. And he had a whole bunch of ticky-tacky ACDC titles behind that Eric liked, but those don't matter.
But if you think about it, Chris, wouldn't the best dog be one that's associated with like the goofiest handler? So we should probably bring in 5-time Grand Retriever champion Lewis of Loveland. He has carried his trainer and handler a lot.
I'm going to tell you, for Lewis to have 5 Grand Passes and have that certain handler handling him, that dog has to be exceptional. Literally exceptional. So,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Lewis is a real deal. But I don't have anything else. Dave, do you?
I'm good.
Elliot?
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, let's close this one down. And the next episode you guys are going to be hearing, Dave is going to answer a bunch of questions that have come into us on the Facebook group. So make sure and tune into that. That'll be really entertaining. Dave, thank you so much for spending this time with us and joining us. And we will wrap this up and see you guys on the next one.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you,
Everybody
folks.
on the line.
Appreciate it.
Take that in.
Gotta strike this chord with the humble hearts. I'm bearing heavy chains and blue collar scars. Inevitably you're gonna get the way. If you don't take that fight, take it to the grave.